rights of women and in the need for a continuing feminist movement. I've been a feminist all my life.
I'm often called a misogynist by various feminists. I think there's something very insidious about this new third-wave feminism that we're seeing brewing.
And today, we still need a strong feminist and Me Too movement.
I think the idea of toxic masculinity is a ruse, and I don't think there's anything really substantial when it comes to the pay gap. I think the statistics are skewed.
When I run up against people who fundamentally disagree with me, it's really a question usually of education and of explaining to them that this is a people's movement. Hi, I'm Judy.
Dominic.
That's a very aggressive handshake, isn't it? Dominic! My name's Dominic! Fucking bad. Feminism is today's topic, and for this I found this video. Called Face Your Hater. There's a few of these out there. But basically, it's quite an interesting show. They take two sides who not only fundamentally disagree with each other, but would actually probably despise each other in the normal narrative. So in this case, a misogynist. I don't know if that's like... He's probably come on and said like, oh, people claim I'm a misogynist. So a misogynist versus a feminist. Naturally, a feminist will hate a misogynist, and a misogynist will hate the feminist. And he just sort of said his point of view there about third-wave feminism. So yeah, so I thought this would be an interesting one, especially since the misogynist is someone from Yorkshire, my neck of the woods. So this will be interesting. I'm getting in the mood of like predicting what I'm going to see in videos now. So I'm going to predict he's going to say women are meant to be breeders, and toxic masculinity is obviously made up. He said that, but I'm going to say he's going to say it's caused by women who are taking the role of the men away from the men, something like that. I imagine he'll say something like that. Let's see how it goes. Though apparently the gender pay gaps also get brought up.
Nice to meet you.
I love that aggressive handshake though he did.
So, Dominic, why do you think we're here today?
I think we're here to talk about women's issues, and I see the modern feminist movement as pushing victimization as opposed to empowerment. It almost seems, and I'm going to say this from a personal perspective, it almost seems that the idea is to castigate men to a certain degree.
I think that's an old idea.
For instance, the Me Too movement has been almost 100% women, you know, almost 100%, and then
not true at all. Men have come forward in the Me Too movement. I'm a little closer to this than probably a lot of people, just purely because of the wrestling industry, because obviously I've got a history in the wrestling industry, and I did see a lot of this, but male wrestlers did come forward. Naturally, women are going to be more likely the victims of something like that, purely because there is a difference in terms of vulnerability. Men tend to do the training in wrestling as well, because that's where I'm basing my ideas from here. You do tend to be very hyper masculinized, the very definition of toxic masculinity, to be honest, and they do tend to go after, therefore, female trainees. And that's why there's an imbalance there. And I feel that's probably the case in most power structures. It's normally men in that position to abuse that power. Now, that's not to say men cannot be the victims. They absolutely can be. But that might be the reason why there's less of them. Or we can also say maybe there's more than we even think, because part of toxic masculinity is you feel like it would be very unmanly of you to come forward about being abused in such a way, and that might make people think that you are basically feminine. You're taking on a feminine quality by being the victim there, and that's a problem. So this whole idea of Me Too movement bad, you're taking away masculinity from men, toxic masculinity isn't real. All these things contradict each other because they're all examples of each other. the reason why Me Too seems to be female dominated is because of the power role men have, or the masculine qualities of men preventing them from coming forward about their own abuse. So they're literally self-defeating arguments, these.
We're getting the little bits here and there. Now, I know a lot of guys who were
I do too.
sexually harassed.
I know a lot of guys who self-identify as feminists. I think the Me Too movement is a really necessary movement. It's a we too, not just a Me Too, it's a we too. It's men and women banding together to say that harassment is not okay. Traditionally, it's been more aimed at women because there's more sexual harassment of women.
I don't know about that either.
Really?
And I'll tell you why. I think there's a dual standard here.
Have you been harassed sexually?
I have. I've actually been touched as a working in bars.
Mm-hmm.
I've had my.
So he's defeated himself here, where he said, "Oh well, I've also been the victim of sexual assault." Or I guess he's saying, or he's saying being touched inappropriately. Yeah. So rather than just like attacked and forced into a sexual situation, he's talking about being touched inappropriately, which is something that people will come forward for as part of Me Too. He touched me inappropriately. He felt like I belonged to him, so he was like being too handsy, all that stuff. Yeah, stuff we've heard before. So if he's been a bouncer, and what a face he's pulling, by the way. If he's been a bouncer, yeah, I can absolutely see why that could have happened, and that's a bad thing. And I would suggest if that has happened, he would highlight that issue, and that person would be banned. Surely, isn't that the appropriate response? This customer keeps sexually assaulting the bar staff or the bouncers, whatever. Cool, they're banned. Let's not bring them back. Or let's press charges. But the way he said it there, he's kind of going, well, this happened to me and nothing happened. Well, did you speak up about it? Did you highlight that issue? Because the whole point of the Me Too movement is we're highlighting that these things are happening and something needs to be done about it. If you're just letting it happen and you're not doing anything about it, then all it tells me is you need to start coming forward, since it clearly bothers you. Be part of the movement, basically.
Genitals squeezed.
Uh-huh.
And you know something.
How'd you react?
In all fairness, I didn't mind it.
I didn't mind it. Right, defeat your own argument. Oh, I was sexually assaulted once. Oh, right, that's really bad. You should have. We need to hold the people to account. Oh no, I didn't mind it really. Oh well, okay. So well, clearly that's not an issue. Then you didn't mind it. Fucking hell. Are you saying? Well, yeah, we all get sexually assaulted, but it's not a big deal. Just move on with your life. Yeah, just take the sexual assault. Is that what you're claiming, mate? Jesus.
By a man or a woman?
It was by well, I would have minded it if it was a bloke.
Okay, and what if it was a bloke?
I would have been pissed off.
Right. Okay, and why would you have been pissed off?
Because it's a bloke.
And why would you have been pissed off? Because you didn't give that person the right to touch you.
Exactly.
And that's what women are saying.
But what I'm saying is this.
You don't have the right to touch me unless I tell you you have the right to touch me.
I understand 100%.
That's bottom line what it's about. What I'm saying is this.
Nobody's accusing...
Fucking owned. Wow. If I was him, I'd get up and leave now. I was like, oh, I've made a boo-boo there. I'm fucked here. Shit. He's actually just gone on. Well, so I got touched and I didn't mind. What if it was a lad? Oh, it was a lad. That's gay. No, I'm not gay. No, I do something then because it's gay, innit? Well done. Well done on proving that toxic masculinity doesn't exist, pal. Wow.
People like Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt of sexual harassment. Why are they accusing Harvey Weinstein? Because he's not very attractive and he's morbidly obese. If it was Brad Pitt, most women would be all over it. No. Oh, God, come over here, touch me front bottom.
Maybe it's because Brad Pitt hasn't been out there harassing women in the way that Harvey Weinstein has.
That's a possibility, but it's not really a probability, especially in Hollywood the way it is.
I don't know what to say. What can you say to that? Right? is there any attractive people we know of who have been outed by the Speaking Out movement, the Me Too movement? Yes, there is. Lots of attractive people, because people don't actually rate attractiveness as like on a scale of allowed to get away with rape and not allowed to get away with rape. So that's bollocks for a start. Once again, completely self-defeating. And also, maybe the reason why Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio haven't been outed is maybe they're not sexually assaulting women. And that's me not even looking into it. There might be someone out there who has named either of those two at some point. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. But at the same time, this guy's position seems to be, well, all lads sexually assault women. It's just the nature of being a lad. You have to sexually assault a woman. And I've noticed that of those lads that are sexually assaulting women, only the good looking ones are getting away with it. So that must be the issue. Oh, that's fucking dumb. Wow. The thing is, even if this guy voted Tory, I'd believe it. But because he's not an actual like posh Conservative MP, I can say that usual argument I make where they're not stupid. They think you are, that they'll be able to say this and get away with it. This person is probably just stupid. That he thinks there's a legit argument behind that.
What I don't want is for men in general to be blamed for what the minority's done.
And I can understand that. It's not a...
That's not a thing anyway, so okay. That's what that is snowflakery to the max. Just total victimhood. I find this conversation about toxic masculinity to be quite uncomfortable because it means I have to confront something that might be wrong with me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with me, despite me already saying, like, only all lads rape and just the good looking ones get away with it. So it's this idea that even though you aren't being attacked by anyone, you find just a simple conversation about something that you might have to open up about to be too close to the knuckle. And that's bad. But once again, it's fake victimhood. Shares that with a lot of Tories in that case as well.
Question of blame. It's a question of all of us really understanding what the dynamics have been historically. It's not men versus women, it's men and women.
Obviously, the statistics are that women make 82 cents on the dollar,
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
What are the factors that determine that?
Because traditionally, men have been in the position of deciding what wage is. They are in the power
All right,
position.
so let
they
me
are
give
the
you
bosses.
this. In middle and upper management, most people negotiate their salaries. They do. They go in and say, well, I've got this amount of experience. I'd like this as opposed to that, right? Mm-hmm. Are you saying that women are just not as good as negotiating their salaries?
A lot of women do have a hard time really negotiating their salaries because they're...
So I didn't want to interrupt, really, because she seems to have him handled, but I can see where he was going there when he said, oh, what are the factors behind pay gap? He's actually made quite a big step by saying, oh, the pay gap's real, it's not a myth, but he's trying to come up with a reason why the pay gap exists. And there is a thing with the pay gap that people do misunderstand what it is. So a minimum wage worker in McDonald's who's male will not make more than a minimum wage worker in McDonald's who's female. That's a lie, of course. So when we say the gender pay gap, we're talking overall. Men make more money than women overall. And that's not something that we have to look at the working classes really for, not that much. We have to look at the top jobs. He used middle management as an example. Maybe there's some slight skewing and middle management, but that's not doing the whole thing justice. The real issue is at the very top, it's mainly men. And not only do they get to decide what everyone else gets paid, they get to decide how much wealth they get to hoard at the top. So bankers, for example, CEOs, politicians, they do get to make these decisions for their own benefit, and since that's mainly men at this point, overwhelmingly white men at that, then yeah, that's obviously going to skew the gender pay gap to what we can see. when people take it and pretend it's an issue between workers, like, once again, a worker in McDonald's being male and one being female, and they'd earn different wages, that's not true. And that's what it makes the whole debate a little muddier, because people don't actually know what they're arguing anymore. And they're sort of infighting between the working classes, when the actual fight is with the upper echelon of earners. And that's what this guy needs to work out. His argument about the pay gap doesn't apply to the person sitting across from him. It applies to the people above him, who he doesn't seem willing to attack. Which is weird. I always find it weird when someone clearly who's working class, or from a working class background, seems blind to what's happening above them, and they can't attack the hierarchy. And what they do instead, a lot of them, when they go into this sort of conservative conspiracy theory spiral, is they actually attack a made-up class of, like, world elites, new world order kind of people. Why don't you start with your own government, mate? Just look at the Tories in power. Look at your Prime Minister. What's he doing? Is he making his mates wealthier? If so, then there's your problem. Why don't you attack that?
In a situation where they're more dependent on a male for the employment opportunities, right?
Okay.
And so you're coming in a one-down position to begin with.
So it is victimization. So what you're saying is you do believe that women are victims, and the whole movement is based on...
Victimization in the sense of they are treated as less than, yes, but that doesn't mean that they have to...
This whole... I don't know why people treat victim as a dirty word. Once again, that's toxic masculinity. Oh, so women are victims. Yeah, anyone who doesn't have a say in how they're treated, yeah, is a victim of how they're being treated. Yeah, of course. If I graffiti your car, you haven't had a say in that. I've just come and done it. Like, I key it, I put some spray paint, right, nonce on the bonnet and all that stuff. Bald nonce, I put that on your bonnet, right? And maybe put a brick through your windscreen. You're a victim in that case, aren't you? Because you've not had a say in that. I've just gone and done it. You're just dealing with the consequences of that. So you are a victim of crime there. So same with the gender pay gap and women in work. They don't ultimately have a say in the conditions in which they work. Not really. So when they are put in a position where they're earning less, or they're being treated differently in the workplace because of their gender, there might be the target of certain types of harassment. Yeah, of course they're victims, and that's fine. Like, why is victim in that case a dirty word? And I'm purely imagine, once again, great face from him. I'd love to turn him into a series of emojis for Twitch at some point. It's a very expressive face. So yeah, this toxic masculinity, this idea that being a victim is a bad thing, like something that should be avoided, and that's probably the reason why men don't come forward about being victims of sexual abuse, to be honest.
Differently,
but they don't have to remain victims.
How about this?
And one of the good things that's happened is that you can no longer ask wage history, okay?
Right.
When you apply for a job, and that's going to help.
I don't know why women just don't start businesses, have Fortune 100 companies, and just hire women in the highest paid positions. I don't know why we have to legislate this. I don't know why we can't just let the market dictate.
I don't know why women don't just become successful. If you're so good, why don't you just go become successful? Fucking dumb. Fucking what a dumbass argument. Like, that's like... Have you tried not being depressed?
Because the market hasn't been fair. Okay, that's assuming that the market has been fair.
People should just get together and have these kind of conversations. I think that men and women can work together, and I think women should empower themselves by starting companies, employ women to powerful positions, and lead by example. I don't think...
You know what I'd say if that actually happened? Another great face. You know what I'd say if that actually happened? If someone came forward, a woman came forward and was like, I have made my millions. I am now going to open my own business using those millions, and I'm going to hire just women, and I'm going to give them more than the standard wage for the jobs they're doing. So I'm going to better all women that work for us. And if you're a man, you cannot apply here. This is just for the betterment of women. He'd say that's sexist. He 100% would. And he'd want that company shut down. He'd boycott everything to do with that company, anyone associated with that company, because he'd think that's an attack on masculinity, where women are trying to take over the employment sphere and make sure no man has a job. 100% he would.
The victimization of women through the women's movement is good for anybody, women included.
Right now, it is time to tear down the patriarchy. We're fighting for opportunity. We're fighting to be treated as equals in the workforce and as equals in terms of our relationships with men, to really see that as fundamental to who we are as people. This is not a me movement or a you movement, it's an us movement. And the only way it's going to change on any kind of real fundamental level is when men and women work together to change that. We need this continuing awareness of really, yes, how far we've come, but also how far we've got to go. Welcome to the fight.
Fantastic.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Dominic, and I think
I don't know how much of his stuff was cut out at the end there, because I really just let a monologue, and you could see that in the edits. But he said his talking points there that I've heard a million times before, but she pretty effectively shut him down there, I think. It's certainly given the impression that he's walking away with a changed mind to an extent, but I don't know. At least he's basically done what a lot of people in his position does when they realise they sit down with someone who knows what they're talking about and find out that their own personal ideas about this issue is bollocks, total bollocks. But he's basically probably just shied away from the debate. He said his little lines, his little practice lines, but then ultimately has finished and walked away, no longer holding that view anymore. I feel like that's what's happened. Let's see what the closing statements say.
what we found was that on many issues, we're not all that far apart.
I actually thought that was a cathartic exercise. I really enjoyed the conversation with Judy. I think more than anything, she's a very nice person, and I know she's extremely learned, so I can learn a lot from her.
And I think when he focuses more on what it means for all of us, inclusively, men and women, and how empowering that can really be for all of us, that he's beginning to understand his knuckles don't have to scrape the bottom of the floor quite the way they used to.
I think that a lot more conversations like this should happen between people of polar opinions.
So that is interesting. It definitely gives the impression that he's walked away from that conversation at least a little bit enlightened, which is a good thing. I guess that's an example of when someone sits down and talks to someone they disagree with one of these issues. It's actually a wider conversation where I think a lot, especially when you take a working class Tory, this is usually someone who has been manipulated in many ways, and they're being made to worry about certain things that they actually shouldn't be worrying about, and to ignore things that they definitely should be worried about. And it is the case, in my experience, that if you are able to sit down and have a conversation with these types of people, provided they're not going to immediately start shouting and going all Tommy Robinson on you, basically, provided they don't go that far, they'll probably can be convinced that the manipulation they've suffered can be dropped, and they can start to move on, become more progressive. And for someone in the working class, that is ultimately going to result in more rights for themselves, higher wages down the line, just better opportunities for their children, and a better world all around. It's just a case of having those conversations. The feminist issue, same as the trans issue, same as racism issues, same as homophobia issues, same as immigration issues. All of these issues come right back to being working class. We cannot have a working class movement if we start to kick people out of the working class movement. So when we are talking about feminism, feminism actually belongs to the working class movement.